Most people believe introversion simply exists, a personality trait as fixed as eye color, as unchangeable as height. They assume some individuals naturally gravitate towards solitude, while others chase crowds, never questioning the deeper currents that sculpt these tendencies. But what if I told you that your quietest moments, your most guarded silences, your instinct to step back rather than step forward, what if none of these emerged from nothing? The truth is far more complex and infinitely more healing. Your introversion tells a story, not just of who you are, but of where you've been. Every hesitation before speaking, every racing heartbeat when strangers approach, every preference for observation over participation. These aren't random quirks of temperament. They're emotional archaeology, layers of learned behavior deposited by years of navigating the particular weather patterns of your childhood home. Understanding this changes everything, because when you realize that much of what you call personality was actually adaptation, you also discover that adaptation can evolve. The same mind that learned to seek safety in silence can learn to find strength in it too. Picture a child entering the world with arms wide open, voice unfiltered, heart unguarded. This child speaks without calculating consequences, laughs without measuring volume, approaches relationships like adventures waiting to unfold. There's no self-consciousness yet, no internal editor whispering warnings about saying too much or taking up too much space. But then something shifts. Maybe it's subtle, a raised eyebrow when they share an excited story, a gentle but firm "not now" when they interrupt adult conversations, a comparison to their more reserved sibling who knows how to behave. Or perhaps it's more direct, laughter at their earnest questions, dismissal of their big emotions, or criticism disguised as guidance about being more appropriate. Each of these moments plants seeds in fertile young soil. The child's developing brain, wired for survival above all else, begins drawing connections. Enthusiasm equals embarrassment, expression equals rejection, visibility equals vulnerability. So they adjust, not consciously, they're far too young for such complex reasoning, but instinctively, the way a plant grows toward light or away from heat. This adjustment looks like caution creeping into their voice. It manifests as longer pauses before speaking, careful observation before participating. They begin testing the emotional temperature of rooms before entering conversations. They learn to read faces, tone, and energy with microscopic precision, becoming experts at emotional meteorology. What their caregivers often interpret as maturing or calming down is actually something far more profound. The birth of hypervigilance wrapped in the clothing of quietness. Psychologists have identified this phenomenon as adaptive inhibition, the brain's sophisticated response to environments where full expression feels unsafe. When a child's nervous system repeatedly encounters unpredictability, criticism, or emotional unavailability from their primary caregivers, it develops what researchers call a threat detection system. This system operates below conscious awareness, constantly scanning for signs of potential emotional danger. A parent's subtle sigh might signal incoming disappointment. A slight change in vocal tone could indicate brewing frustration. The quiet that precedes dinner might mean someone's mood has shifted dangerously. Over time, this hyper-awareness becomes exhausting. The child's brain, seeking relief from constant vigilance, discovers that withdrawal offers respite. Solitude becomes synonymous with safety. Silence transforms from something feared into something craved. But here's where the story becomes particularly poignant. This isn't dysfunction, it's brilliant adaptation. The child who learns to navigate emotional complexity through careful observation and strategic withdrawal isn't broken. They're surviving with remarkable intelligence, developing skills that will serve them throughout life, even as they carry invisible costs. The tragedy lies not in their adaptation, but in how rarely this adaptation is recognized for what it truly is. A testament to resilience, not evidence of deficiency. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this pattern is how unconsciously it perpetuates itself. The parents who inadvertently teach their children that quietness equals safety often learned this lesson themselves decades earlier. They're not villains, they're previous generations of adapted children, passing along survival strategies that once protected them. Consider the father who dismisses emotional expression because his own father taught him that feelings were weakness, or the mother who interrupts her child's stories because her own voice was silenced so thoroughly that she never learned to value others' words. They're not choosing to harm, they're unconsciously repeating the only emotional language they were ever taught. This generational transmission happens through 1,000 tiny moments. It's woven into family culture through unspoken rules. Don't be too loud, don't take up too much space, don't burden others with your feelings, don't expect too much attention. These rules feel like love, like preparation for a harsh world, but they often function as emotional anesthesia, numbing children's natural expressiveness in the name of protection. Breaking these cycles requires something radical, recognizing that what looked like personality was actually inheritance, and that inherited patterns can be consciously transformed. One of the most common companions to childhood-induced introversion is perfectionism. This pairing isn't coincidental, it's logical. When love feels conditional on performance, when acceptance depends on being good, children learn to edit themselves ruthlessly before any form of expression. They rehearse conversations before having them. They craft perfect responses to anticipated questions. They become experts at saying the right thing rather than the true thing. This internal editing system, once developed, doesn't simply disappear when childhood ends. It evolves into adult perfectionism, creating individuals who speak only when certain their words are flawless, who share only when guaranteed their offerings won't be rejected. The result is a peculiar form of isolation, being surrounded by people who admire your thoughtfulness while feeling completely unknown by them. Because perfectionism, while protective, is also profoundly alienating. It creates connection based on performance rather than authenticity, leaving the real person hidden beneath layers of careful curation. Here's what makes introversion particularly complex. Those who struggle most with surface-level social interaction often crave the deepest forms of human connection. They're not antisocial. They're starving for something more substantive than small talk and social performance. This isn't snobbery. It's survival strategy. When you've learned to communicate through careful observation and emotional subtlety, superficial exchanges feel not just empty but actively draining. They require enormous energy to navigate, because they demand constant performance without offering the authentic connection that would make that performance worthwhile. This is why introverts often report feeling more energized after deep, meaningful conversations than after large social gatherings. It's not that they dislike people. It's that they've learned to find nourishment only in interactions that feel genuine enough to be worth their carefully guarded emotional resources. The revolutionary moment comes when you realize that understanding your introversion's origins doesn't require changing your fundamental nature. It requires reclaiming it. The same sensitivity that once made you withdraw can become a superpower of empathy. The same careful observation that once protected you can become wisdom that guides others. The same preference for depth over breadth can become a gift you offer to a world drowning in superficiality. Healing doesn't mean becoming extroverted. It means becoming free. Free to choose silence when it serves you, rather than when fear demands it. Free to speak when authenticity calls, rather than only when perfection guarantees safety. Free to connect deeply, without the terror that such connection will somehow repeat childhood wounds. This freedom begins with small acts of courage, saying what you think without rehearsing it first, allowing someone to see you struggle without immediately apologizing for your humanity, expressing needs without first calculating whether those needs are reasonable or convenient for others. Each time you choose authenticity over safety, your nervous system learns something new. Expression doesn't equal danger anymore. The world doesn't end when you take up space. Love doesn't vanish when you reveal imperfection. As this healing unfolds, something beautiful happens to your relationship with solitude. It stops being primarily about escape and becomes about choice. You no longer withdraw because people are overwhelming. You retreat because inner peace requires tending. You don't avoid social situations from fear. You select them based on alignment with your values and energy. This conscious solitude looks different from protective isolation. It's generative rather than defensive, creative rather than avoidant. It becomes time for reflection rather than rumination, for restoration rather than hiding. You begin to understand that your introversion isn't a limitation to overcome, but a lens through which you experience depth that others often miss. You notice subtleties in conversation, meaning in silence, poetry in ordinary moments. This isn't consolation for being quiet. It's recognition of what your quietness has always contained. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this healing journey is how it interrupts generational patterns. When you understand your own introversion's origins, you become capable of seeing and responding to children's natural temperaments without projecting your own adaptive strategies onto them. You can celebrate a child's exuberance without feeling threatened by their energy. You can honor a child's sensitivity without teaching them that sensitivity equals weakness. You can model that love isn't conditional on personality type, that quiet children and loud children both deserve full acceptance. This doesn't mean abandoning boundaries or failing to teach social skills. It means recognizing the difference between helping children navigate the world and teaching them to diminish themselves to fit it. There's a particular kind of power that emerges when someone who learned to hide their depth finally chooses to share it selectively and authentically. It's not the power of volume or performance. It's the power of presence, of genuine witness, of offering others permission to be real in a world that often rewards pretense. When you speak from this place, people lean in, not because you're entertaining them, but because you're offering something increasingly rare, authentic human connection. Your introversion becomes not a barrier to intimacy, but a pathway to it. You discover that the same skills that once served as emotional armor, careful listening, deep observation, thoughtful response, can become tools for profound connection when employed from choice rather than fear. The most beautiful aspect of this journey is how it transforms your relationship with your own voice. You stop seeing your words as potentially dangerous and start experiencing them as potentially powerful. You begin speaking not to perform or to please, but to contribute something true and valuable to the world. This doesn't mean becoming someone you're not. It means becoming more fully who you've always been beneath the layers of protective adaptation. It means trusting that your perspective, shaped by years of careful observation and deep feeling, has something unique to offer. Your quietness becomes intentional rather than fearful. Your solitude becomes nourishing rather than isolating. Your selectivity in relationships becomes wisdom rather than avoidance. In the end, understanding your introversion's origins leads to a profound realization. You were never broken, just protected. Your childhood taught you to survive in the only way available to you at the time. Now, armed with adult awareness and choice, you can transform those survival strategies into life-enhancing gifts. You can be quiet and courageous, gentle and powerful, reserved and deeply connected. You can offer the world something it desperately needs. The wisdom that comes from having learned to find peace within yourself, the empathy that develops from having navigated emotional complexity, and the authenticity that emerges when you finally trust that you deserve to be known. Your introversion isn't something that happened to you. It's something that shaped you into someone uniquely capable of depth, insight, and genuine human connection. The quiet child who once withdrew from a world that felt unsafe has grown into someone who can create safety for others through the simple act of authentic presence. That's not just healing, that's transformation. That's not just survival, that's the beginning of a life lived fully awake, courageously quiet, and beautifully, authentically you.